It's Thursday, February 16th, 2023, and this is FRC Media News. I'm Keith Tebow. We're doing something a little different this week on our program. We're going to dedicate the entire show this week to talk about economic development in Fall River. I'm pleased to be joined this week by the Executive Vice President of Bristol County Economic Development Consultants, Ken Fiola. Thank you for joining us today. I want to spend our time today to talk about economic development. That's such a broad term, and it's used a lot in cities like Fall River in terms of building up quality of life in a city. And I want to get into some specifics as well as some history. I'm pleased to be joined today by Ken Fiola. He is the Executive Vice President of Bristol County Economic Development Consultants, BCEDC. It's a mouthful, right?
It is a mouthful.
Ken, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Good, Keith. Thank you for having me.
You know, in general, when people talk about economic development, right, a lot of people have heard that phrase, but there may be some confusion. It's basically what I said, right? Quality of life, making a city better, right?
It's funny that you bring that up, because I think if you were to ask 10 people for a definition of economic development, you'd get probably 10 different definitions.
Right.
Most of them would contain some of the same terms that you're bringing up: quality of life, business growth, jobs, those types of things. But there's really no finite, definitive definition of economic development. So from our perspective, our definition is try to incorporate policies and programs that create jobs, help small businesses succeed, recruit larger businesses into the community, improve quality of life, and also do all the things necessary to realize those things. And a lot of the realization of those things and having those things come to fruition, a lot of it's behind the scenes work in terms of permitting and establishing programs and going after grants and doing a whole bunch of things. So it's a very complicated area of study, but the results, I think, are measured by quality of life, job growth, new tax revenue, stabilization of tax revenues.
The entity, Bristol County Economic Development Consultants, started out as what, Jobs for Fall River, Inc.?
Jobs for Fall River, Inc. is still our legal name.
That is the legal
name. It's a DBA, BC, Bristol County Economic Development Consultants.
And then it was for Office of Economic Development.
It was.
It's always been a nonprofit organization.
It's always
correct?
been a nonprofit. We've never taken a dime of any city money. We've been established since 1978.
Right. You've been there since 1986.
1986 is what I came on board as a project manager, and I became the executive vice president in the late 90s.
Now, in terms of, looking back in the late 70s when it started, you were finishing a high school basketball career here at Durfee High School, and being a student, of course, and going on to college. But from what you know, how was economic development handled by the city back then?
I think there were a couple different groups. Certainly the Chamber of Commerce played a role in economic development. There was also an industrial foundation that played a role in economic development.
Is that still what's in the industrial park now?
No, there was an actually city industrial foundation, and then there's the entity that runs or is the owner of the industrial park is the Greater Fall River Development Corporation. So when you look at how the office came to fruition, then City Mayor Carlton Viveras established the office with the premise that he wanted the office not to be part of city government, and he wanted to bring a private work ethic to this office so that we work different, longer hours than the city would. So, and the primary mission of the office at that time was to issue low interest loans to small Fall River businesses so that they could either stabilize or expand.
And for a long period of time, the office was right on the 6th floor of Government Center.
We were on the 6th floor because in those days there was some value to having the office located in Government Center in close proximity to the mayor's office. So as that issues pertaining to economic development would arise, it was easy for us to just walk over, sit with the mayor or sit with the client and start addressing whatever concerns they may have.
Now, even though the organization is a separate 501(c), not a government entity, has there always been collaboration, coordination with cities' master plans, cities' strategic plans, that type of thing? Because you're working not on behalf of the city, but in conjunction with the city. So is there always that collaboration, cooperation?
Yeah, so there's always been that cooperation and collaboration. City's master plan looks at the entire city from a lot of different perspectives, right? What we were able to do during the course of my tenure in the office, and actually a little bit before that, was also develop our own plans, primarily for urban renewal districts, as well as the waterfront. So in the early days, and still today, we work with the Fall River Redevelopment Authority. We help them create 4 different urban renewal plans, which are like little mini economic development plans. And we also helped conduct a study back in the early 2000s pertaining to the waterfront and what the vision of the waterfront could be. And the vision, the study, I laugh because I remember when we completed that study, the consultant told us it's going to be 20 years before you implement this plan. 20 years, 20 years ago seemed like an eternity. I said, no, we're going to get it done quicker than that. But lo and behold, we've just, had the groundbreaker for the Route 79 project, which is almost the last piece of that plan. But that plan consisted of, cityscape improvements to Water Street and Duval Street in terms of period lighting. The extension of the boardwalk from Heritage State Park down to Veterans Memorial Park. The cleanup and repurposing of the city pier. The removal of the spaghetti ramps. The siting of the carousel as a location along the waterfront. All different things that we had to go through to accomplish, but the only way we could accomplish those was through the securement of city grant funds, state and federal grant funds to initiate those types of projects. So it's taken us 20 years to get to the point where we are now today. We just recently announced the $135 million Route 79 improvement project, which will result in 19 developable acres along the waterfront. And we're looking at the possibility, or we're hoping that we'll be able to accommodate 1.1 to 1.4 million square feet of development within those 19 acres. And that development will consist of market rate housing. It's going to consist of restaurant, office, retail space, and some open space.
Will that eventually be under the purview of the Redevelopment Authority?
That's still, right now we're taking one step at a time. So technically the state will own the land. Either they'll transfer it to the Redevelopment Authority will purchase the land from them, or there could be another entity that'll be doing it. It wouldn't be our office, but could be another entity.
Right. So, a lot of people, because the close relationship that the organization has had with the city, again, still feels it's a city entity,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
But there's so much more that the organization does, and I want to get into that a little bit right now. You provide funding opportunities, research opportunities in terms of businesses looking to locate in Fall River, finding them locations, things of that sort. Talk about that and how it's not always working with city projects, I guess.
No. So a lot of times we work just with the private sector.
Right.
So if you look at the industrial park itself, and I encourage people to drive through the industrial park because I think they're pleasantly surprised when they go through there in terms of the amount of buildings that are there, and also the abutting Commerce Park, which used to be the Fall River Airport, that we actually helped facilitate its closure because once the landfill built up there, it was unsafe for planes to operate there. So we transformed that 150 acres into another appendage to the industrial park. But I can honestly state that we've assisted just about every company within that industrial park, whether in terms of the recruitment of the company to Fall River, or whether it's providing financing for an expansion, or helping them secure a tax increment financing agreement with the city and associated state investment tax credits. But every project up there and every building has our fingerprints on it. That goes from the Amazon complex, which is in the technology park, down to Millstone Medical, which is in the Commerce Park, which started out in mill space down on North Main Street, and it graduated to occupying close to 100,000 square feet up there. So all those projects fall under our purview, and we helped get them through those permitting processes, financing processes, tax increment financing processes to actually help them locate in Fall River, and that's generated millions of dollars in tax revenue for the city.
Now, in terms of the initial connections, right? I would think that, just thinking as an outsider, that if I'm a business that's looking to locate in Fall River, my first call may be, say, to the mayor's office.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And then is there an agreement between your organization and the city that the mayor's office may not have the infrastructure to directly service that kind of request? They would send that to BCEDC?
Yeah, historically that's how it's worked, but for the exception of one administration,
Right.
that's how.
So you want to get into it?
That's how it's always worked. So yeah, or sometimes a lot of businesses, because there's always I find there's always some hesitancy of businesses getting involved with government.
Right.
And that's why our office is there.
Right.
So sometimes a business will outreach to other business owners in the city and say, look, we're thinking about coming here, who should we talk to? And the referral may come from those businesses to our office. Correct, yeah. So it's a mixture of both. Being around as long as we have, I think our reputation is sound and it's solid. And the nice aspect of our discussions with businesses is that it all remains confidential.
Right.
We're not subject to FOIA requests. If I'm talking to you, Keith, and you have a business and you're sharing your personal and your corporate tax returns with me, you don't want to have that made public. So you talk to us about that. That all remains confidential, and then we can figure out what you need in order for your business to grow, expand, or relocate.
Is there an aspect of the organization that can be proactive as well, in terms of if you as an organization see an economic development need that hopefully is in conjunction with the city to go out and do that recruiting?
Yeah, so back in the, I often tell this story. In the 1990s, if you looked at Fall River's economy, you would see that there was 21,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector. If you look at our economy today, there's less than 4,000 in manufacturing. So for the longest period of time, Fall River was an apparel and textile community. It provided good jobs, for people. You didn't need a lot of educational attainment level. You could drop out of school and go directly into these places and work and provide for your family and buy a triple decker or whatever. But the floor fell out in the early 90s when a lot of the manufacturing production shifted offshore. So we had a large constituency of people that were losing their jobs. And so at that time, we decided we had to diversify Fall River's economy, no longer put all our eggs in one basket, so that people, in the event of a recession or an event in a change of policy from the federal government, things beyond our control, that Fall River wouldn't be hurt as much. So we took a proactive approach at that point to really start to try to diversify our economy. We brought in the Stop and Shop distribution facility, even though it's located in Freetown. Right. We couldn't accommodate them in Fall River, but that was a distribution facility that created over 1,000 jobs, easily for people to go from manufacturing into distribution. We brought in other distribution companies in the industrial park. And then ultimately, the biggest coup was Amazon, obviously, that has close to 2,000 jobs. So we diversified the economy, proactively, so that we didn't have to reactively react to things that were negative, right? So, and then at the same time, we're also trying to grow jobs in the healthcare sector. To be honest with you, it's the one thing that hurts, and this is always an issue, right? And I have this all the time. I hear this all the time. We need to get companies with higher paying jobs. And I understand that. And I would love to be able to do that. Right. But what people need to understand is those types of companies, whether it's bio or there's financial, financial sector companies or other things, they require a workforce with a higher degree of educational attainment levels. Mm-hmm. Our workforce is getting better in terms of education, but we're still not there. So if I'll put it, so we were shortlisted for a couple of large bio companies in the technology park. I won't tell you their names because they're confidential. They're 500 jobs, extremely high paying. And the primary reason they didn't, it wasn't because of land price, it wasn't because of infrastructure, it wasn't because of, location. The reason they didn't come here is they didn't think they could get the workforce that they needed. So we tried to, say, look, you can pull a workforce from Route 28 south all the way down to Fall River, through Providence and down through the Cape and Aquidneck Island. But that was too big a risk for them because the project cost was in excess of $500 million, and for them to leverage or put $500 million towards this project, they had to have a guarantee that they could.
Guarantees, yeah.
Right, and that was, that seemed to be, an eye opener for us, and that's why we try to get jobs now that are well-paying jobs, in concert with our educational attainment levels, and hopefully, when people are working, they're imposing the importance of education on their kids, so that 10 years from now we'll be in a better situation to attract different types of industries.
Before I get into another, I just want to follow up on that. Will the introduction of South Coast Rail next year, this year, we're in 2023, could that help in that aspect in terms of trying to recruit some of those businesses that have higher educational attainments where people can work in Fall River, living somewhere else, more easily can get down here?
Yeah, so I think there's a combination of things that helps us with this issue. One is South Coast Rail. So what South Coast Rail is initially going to do is provide people that are working in the Boston market area the opportunity to move further south, relocate in a city like Fall River or the suburbs, and still have a safe, affordable, dependable means of transportation to Boston on a daily basis. But they'll come down here because the cost of living is less expensive. But by bringing those people down here, we're also bringing in people that may have higher educational attainment levels, may be more professional.
That are living here.
That are living here.
Right.
Correct. So now they're going to become part of the community. The other aspect of helping to stabilize this equation is the introduction of market rate housing. So over the past few years, my office has been intimately involved in the creation and helping facilitate the creation of, Commonwealth Landing, the Adams House, the Cornell Mill on Alden Street and the associated projects there, the one on Globe Mills Ave, and also the new project on Duval Street. So collectively, those probably represent close to 400 units of new market rate housing, and the constituency of people coming in to rent those facilities are as follows. One, you have empty nesters who may have been raised and lived in Fall River in their early years, but when they got married, they moved out to the suburbs because they wanted to have their own home and they wanted to have their own yard and they wanted to raise their children in the suburbs. They are now aging, and the house that they may have had is too big for them. The kids have moved away. They can't maintain it, or they don't want to maintain it. And so they're coming back into the city to be closer to restaurants, healthcare services, grocery stores, things like that. The second constituency is young professionals moving in. Two young professionals can easily share a two-bedroom apartment that may be $1,800 to $2,000 a month, and they're locating in Fall River. And the third constituency is people that are in Fall River looking for better housing accommodations. They may become tired of living in a second or third floor apartment on whatever street you want that doesn't have the amenities that people become accustomed to, such as central air, security, off-street parking, those types of things. And they move out of those locations into newer apartments. Yeah. So all that combined, I think, is now helping to bring in more people into the city in a positive way.
Yeah, I want to talk about your relationships with mayors. For the longest time, we talked about how the office was physically in Government Center.
Yep.
When Mayor J.C. Correa was in office, he had a different vision. He wanted to take it a different way. He wanted the city to do more of economic development. That's where the organization pivoted to BCEDC.
That's correct.
And I want to get into the future of that in a moment. But did you lose any business because of that? Any opportunities? Do you think the city may have lost some opportunities?
So there's a couple things associated with that administration. Certainly, any mayor has the right to move forward with his or her own agenda in terms of economic development. That's fine. It could include us. It doesn't have to include us. he made a decision not to include us, and he wanted to create his own office and do all these other things, which was okay. It just forced us to reposition ourselves to now, okay, let's figure out how we're going to survive as an entity. But what he couldn't, and he was not, and he should not do, and he tried to do, is cut our existing contracts with the redevelopment authority and the other things, because those hurt us financially, and so now we had to litigate and do all these other things. And then obviously he got into his own legal trouble. So unfortunately, the way I look at it is, Fall River lost 3 tremendous years of opportunity, because the years where he was mayor was probably the hottest economy that we're going to see in our lifetime. Okay, businesses were expanding.
You said hot, H-O-T.
H-O-T.
Okay, right. You said hot, not hard, H-A-R-D.
No, hot test, right?
Hot test.
And so businesses were expanding, companies were really relocating, so forth and so on. But once he was indicted, that cast a pale over the city. Right. No companies were looking to come in. Government money dried up. No money was really coming in from the state or the federal government, because let's look at it. The feds and the state want to invest in communities that they know are under sound leadership and management. And when those indictments came forward, whether or not he was proven guilty at that time or not, it was enough of a hesitancy to preclude that investment coming in. So we lost those 3 years of investment, and we lost those opportunities. And now the economy has since cooled off a little bit. Recession has taken place. But despite that, we're still able to move forward, but we just lost those 3-4 years.
Right. I want to spend a few moments about some of the services you offer to businesses, and some of it is financial. And I was on the website the other day in preparation for this interview. One of and there's basically, I think, 3 main grants right now.
3 loan programs.
3 loan programs or grants. There was one that's still related to COVID.
Yes.
ARPA money that the city gave.
That's
I believe it was $2 million at the time?
It was $2 million. They subsequently reduced it to $1 million. And so we're still administering that project. So essentially, the way that project works, it's for small businesses, less than 10 employees. And if you can bring us tax returns that shows your 19 tax returns, which was pre-COVID,
right,
and your 20 tax returns, which was COVID, if you if you lost money in 20 in comparison to 19, you're eligible for either a $2,500 grant or a $5,000 grant. Pretty much just you're showing us your tax returns.
Simple.
It's like giving money away, right? Again, there still seems to be a hesitancy about people wanting to do that. So I thought this would be easier than but we're still on the streets.
And I believe there was initial, I remember covering the distribution of, I believe, 50 something at the beginning.
Yeah.
Had there been others? Or?
Yeah. So we've probably given out, I would say, close to 400,000 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're out there every week trying to give out more money. So.
And that, I believe, the ARPA grant, you got until 2026.
It does, yeah.
But it's sort of like, it's almost like.
At some point, we're going to have to extinguish it if there's no more interest in it. Right. So we're going to try to certainly keep pushing that to the end of this.
Does that money go back to the city?
It would go back to the city. So we'll keep pushing it to the end of this fiscal year. We have a person in our office, Kelly, who's actually out, making calls and doing business visits throughout the week to try to encourage people to apply.
Yeah. What are the other funding opportunities for?
So we also have loan programs. So we've, since the incorporation of our office in 1978 to now, we've loaned out more than $85 million to Fall River businesses, from loans as small as $5,000 to $5 million. Those loans are pretty much what we call gap financing on the larger ones. So usually if you're taking a loan under $50,000, that's a direct loan to a business for working capital or whatever. In return for those loans, we look to see that you either retain some jobs or create jobs, and that's the fulfillment requirement that you as a business owner would have to agree to and provide us paperwork on that. Loans that are more, or projects that are bigger than $50,000 or $100,000 will partner with banks. So let's say you have a project that's going to cost you $300,000. Let's say it's to purchase a piece of machinery. You went to the bank says, look, Keith, we looked at all your stuff. We can only give you $200,000. We would look to come in and provide that additional $100,000 so that you'd get your $300,000. The bank would have the first lien position on the equipment. Right. We would have a secondary lien position behind the bank. The bank's interest rate may be, right now it's probably close to 6 or 7%. We try to have an interest rate that's lower than the banks, even though we're taking more risk, to help the business owner, make it easier for the business owner to repay the loans. So that's been a great model for us. It's been hugely successful. We've created and retained in excess of 20,000 jobs during this time period, and we can quantify those because people actually have to fill out the forms and show us where they created the jobs. And we've had very, very little default in that program, despite it being a high-risk program for us. The banks are always protected. It's us that's taking the risk.
Right. Now, when the organization changed its name, Bristol County Economic Development Consultants, are you still basically just a Fall River based, or are you spreading out, I guess, to the rest of Bristol County?
So primarily we're just doing Fall River, especially with our loan programs, but our consulting services extend outside of Fall River. The most notable project that people didn't really realize they were involved with was the whole repurposing of the Swansea Mall.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and helping them and their redevelopment authority get to the point where they could enter into agreements with the new developer up there to create market rate housing, a bunch of retail and professional space, as well as some storage space. The challenge of that project was to extinguish the easements and restrictions that Walmart had over the property. So we put together a strategy along with their legal representative to extinguish those easements to allow the project to move forward. And if you go by there, you're starting to see the mall area being redeveloped. We also provide consulting services to other businesses throughout the Bristol County region.
I want to touch upon one other area. Being in the position you have been for so long, get a lot of criticism that goes with it. A lot of people will, not a lot of people, some people will say that, things that are happening in the city benefit a small group of wealthy individuals. People know their names, right? May benefit Ken Fiola personally. How does that bother you? How do you deal with it?
It's it doesn't bother me at all.
Right.
I think I've become, my skin has grown so thick, I'm sort of like bulletproof from that perspective. But if you look at it historically, there are people that invest in the city. And if we're in a position to help facilitate economic development, it would be logical that would be helping those who are investing in the city. Now, those same entities may invest time and time again. Look at it, somebody like Tony Cadero, who's invested in a bunch of properties, okay? He's contacted us. We've worked with him to help him secure the necessary incentives to move his projects forward. The same thing holds true with, institutions in the city and other people in the city. But I don't think we should be faulted for trying to help those people. We would help anybody. If Keith Tebow came to us and say, I got this huge project or small project, how can you help us? We help you, right? But that doesn't get the notoriety. I can tell you that I have never personally benefited from any of these properties. I do not hold, other than the house that I own in the city, I don't own any other real estate in the community. My wife is a state rep, so that adds to the whole suspicion and conspiracy theories. But I like to think that she and I work for the betterment of this community, trying to create opportunities for future generations.
And there's a city like Fall River has a lot of hardships, and I know you understand that. And that's where a lot of this comes from, right? Well, if you're creating more market rate housing in the city, will my rent go up? And that's a tough balance.
It is. So the market rate housing that we've been involved in has been all rehab of mill space or new construction. Right. So we're not displacing anybody. The overall economic market conditions of residential properties going up as a result of the rail and other things, those are the factors that are causing these multifamily home prices to rise. And if you're buying a multifamily for $600,000-700,000, you got to increase your rents. And some people get displaced. So it's not easy. I understand that, but it's happened everywhere, right? It started in Boston and everything moved south, and now it's Fall River, New Bedford's time. So, the fact is, 28% of Fall River's housing stock is subsidized. That's a huge number.
That's a big number.
Okay, that's a lot. It's one of the biggest in the state, if not the biggest in the state. What I'm trying to do is balance the scales a little bit. bring in enough market rate housing, bring in some workforce housing so that we have a community that represents low income, middle income, and high income. To me, that's a recipe for a successful city. You can't have all low income, you can't have all high income, and you can't have all middle. It's got to be distributed so that people from all walks of life have an opportunity to live here. But at some point, the market overruns us, and that's what's happening now.
Ken Fiola, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Keith,
We'll have these discussions again in the future. I
I'll be
appreciate
happy
it.
to do so, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this special edition of FRC Media News. Please visit our website at frmedia.org for all the latest news and local information. FRC Media News airs Thursdays at 6 p.m. and Fridays at 5:30 p.m. For all of us at FRC Media News, I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Thursday.